The audience was looking at her, waiting for her to do something. She could hear her breath quickening, and she had to remind herself to take it slow. This wasn't just about the talent show, it was about something bigger. Taking a deep breath, she walked over to the piano. She had played this piece so many times in her room, where no one could judge her. But now, it was real. Now, the music was going to speak for her. She sat down, her fingers brushing the cool keys. For a moment, she hesitated, but then she closed her eyes, just like she had done in her room. The world outside faded away, and she began to play. The first few notes felt shaky, but as she played on, the nerves started to settle. Her hands moved more confidently across the keys, and the music began to take shape. It was as if each note carried a little piece of her, the parts of her that had been hidden for so long, the pain, the longing, and the hope that things could get better. She poured all of herself into the music, letting it flow freely, without fear or hesitation. The longer she played, the more she felt the weight of the world lift off her shoulders. The music, which had always been her refuge, was now her voice. She wasn't just playing the piano, she was telling her story. It didn't matter that the bullies had laughed at her, or that some of the kids had made fun of her. None of that mattered now. She was here, doing something she never thought she could do. She was showing them who she really was, and she wasn't afraid anymore. As the final notes of the song rang out, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The gym was silent for a moment, and she was sure her heart was still racing, but she could breathe again. The applause that followed was almost overwhelming, and she had to blink back tears. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected to feel this much relief. It was as if the whole world had seen her for the first time. Not the quiet girl, not the one who was bullied, but the one who had something to say, something to offer. When she stood up from the piano, she didn't feel small anymore. The spotlight, which had once made her feel exposed and vulnerable, now felt empowering. It wasn't about being perfect or about pleasing anyone else. It was about being herself, and that was enough. She had faced her fear, and in doing so, she had found strength she never knew she had. The performance wasn't just a moment for the audience, it was a turning point for her. She realized that she didn't need anyone's approval to be proud of herself. She had something to give, and that was worth more than any judgment or criticism. The applause was nice, but the real victory was the one she had achieved inside herself. The moment she walked off the stage, she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. The loud applause was still ringing in her ears, and she felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her hands were trembling, but not from fear anymore. It was something else, something far more powerful. As she made her way back to her seat, she felt like her entire body was buzzing with energy. The overwhelming rush of emotions made her head spin, but in the best way possible. She had done it. She had stood up there, faced all her fears, and shared her music with the world. It didn't take long for the comments to start coming in. People from her class, the teachers, and even some students she had never spoken to before were approaching her, congratulating her on her performance. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't just invisible. People were seeing her, really seeing her. They weren't laughing at her. They weren't teasing her. Instead, they were applauding her bravery, her talent, and the power of her music. One of the teachers came over with a smile, telling her how beautifully she had played. "I could feel the emotion in every note," the teacher said. "You have an incredible gift." Those words meant more to her than she could have ever imagined. She had always doubted herself, worried that no one would care about what she had to offer. But in that moment, she realized that the music had connected with people in a way she hadn't expected. It was as if her story, her pain, her strength had resonated with them in a way that nothing else could. The applause didn't just come from the adults. Some of the students who had once made fun of her were standing there too, their faces full of admiration. The kids who used to whisper behind her back were now giving her respectful nods, even smiling at her. She caught one of them whispering to a friend, "I didn't know she could play like that." There was no mocking in their voices, only genuine surprise. It felt surreal. After all the teasing, all the moments of self-doubt, she had finally shown them something they couldn't ignore. It wasn't just about the applause. It wasn't about winning or being the center of attention. What mattered was that she had found her voice and shared it with others. She had put herself out there in a way she never thought she could, and in doing so, she had transformed the way others saw her. More importantly, she had transformed the way she saw herself. She wasn't the quiet girl who hid in the back of the classroom anymore. She was someone with something to say, and she wasn't afraid to say it. She tried to ignore the voices of doubt in her head, telling herself it was just a silly school event. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't get the idea out of her mind. Could she really do this? Could she step out of her comfort zone and show the world something that was so personal to her? The piano, the music, it was all so much a part of her. It felt like it was the one thing that no one could take from her. But did she have the courage to share it? Every day after school, she practiced in secret. She would lock herself in her room, turn on the soft light, and sit down at the piano. The keys seemed to welcome her, the familiar sound of each note making her feel like she was in her own little world again. The outside world, with all its judgments and criticisms, disappeared. The music was her safe place, the one place where she didn't feel alone. She had chosen a piece to play, a beautiful, emotional melody that told a story of overcoming struggles, of rising above difficulties. It was a piece that had spoken to her heart the first time she heard it, and it felt like it belonged to her. Every note echoed her own feelings of being misunderstood and struggling to find her place. It was as if the composer had written it just for her. But even as she practiced, the doubts kept creeping in. What if the audience didn't like her music? What if they thought it was too boring or too weird? What if her classmates made fun of her? It was a constant battle in her mind, torn between the desire to show her true self and the fear of rejection. She knew she wasn't ready for the kind of attention the talent show would bring, but something inside her told her she had to at least try. She thought about her mother's words. "Don't hide what you're good at. The world needs to see it." It wasn't just about the talent show anymore. It was about standing up for herself and showing everyone that she was more than just a quiet girl who sat in the back of the classroom. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to show them that she had a voice, even if it wasn't the kind they expected. The day of the talent show announcement, she sat quietly in class, her mind racing with a mix of excitement and fear. She had not yet decided whether or not she would sign up, but the thought of it lingered in her mind. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that this could be the moment that changed everything. It could be the moment when she finally took a step towards showing the world who she really was, someone with strength, talent, and something to say. When the bell rang, signaling the end of the day, her brother was waiting for her at the door. He had been asking her about the talent show every day, his excitement never fading. "Are you going to sign up?" he asked eagerly, his eyes full of hope. For the first time, she didn't answer with a no or a maybe. Instead, she just smiled quietly and nodded. Maybe, just maybe, she was ready to take that first step. The day after she signed up for the talent show, things took a turn she wasn't expecting. At first, there was a strange sense of excitement bubbling inside her. She had made the decision to take a chance, to push herself out of her comfort zone, and it felt like a small victory. But that feeling quickly faded when the first whispers began. It started with a couple of students in the hallway. They didn't even try to hide their laughter as she walked by. They were talking about the talent show, and from what she could overhear, they were already mocking her before she had even stepped foot on the stage. "Did you hear? She's going to play the piano. What's she going to do? Put everyone to sleep?" One of them sneered. The others laughed, a few more joining in with snide comments about her accent, her clothes, and the way she had always kept to herself. Her stomach twisted, and a wave of doubt washed over her. The more she thought about what they said, the more insecure she became. Maybe they were right. Maybe she didn't belong in the talent show after all. She wasn't one of the popular kids. She didn't have the same style or confidence as them. What if her performance wasn't good enough? What if it was boring? What if, when she finally stepped out on that stage, everyone started laughing at her? As the days passed, the mocking didn't stop. It was like a game to them. They found new ways to put her down. Some of the bullies started mimicking her piano playing in the hallways, exaggerating every note like it was a joke. Every time she heard them, it felt like a knife in her chest. They didn't even know what it felt like to pour your heart into something, to be vulnerable in front of others. But to them, it didn't matter. They were just looking for another reason to make her feel small. In the lunchroom, the whispers were louder now. She couldn't escape it, no matter where she sat. A couple of kids at her table snickered every time she walked by, making sure she could hear their comments. "Oh, look, here comes the piano prodigy," one of them would say, rolling their eyes. "I bet she's going to play some sad, boring song that no one cares about." The others would laugh, and she could feel the heat of embarrassment spread across her face. It seemed like they were determined to tear her down before she had even done anything. Her hands shook as she clutched her lunch tray, trying to block out the sound of their laughter. She felt like crawling into a hole and never coming out. It was getting harder to focus on her music now, harder to believe that she had something worth sharing. The bullies made it feel like she was just setting herself up for failure, like she didn't deserve a chance to shine. She could feel their judgment pressing down on her, and it made the piano, which had once been her safe place, feel less welcoming. She thought about quitting. Maybe it would be easier to just back out of the talent show altogether. It wasn't too late. She could still find a way to get out of it, to avoid the embarrassment. But then, in the quiet of her room, she remembered something her mother had told her not long ago. You can't let them define who you are. They don't know your story. They don't know your strength. Those words echoed in her mind, reminding her of what she had been through before. The struggles, the times when she thought she couldn't. Go on. The moments when it felt like the world was against her. Music had always been her escape, her way to express herself without fear of judgment. But now, it was more than just an escape. It was her voice. It was her chance to show the world who she truly was, beyond all the labels they had placed on her. The more she thought about it, the more determined she became. She wasn't going to let their cruel words stop her. She wasn't going to let them take away the one thing that had given her peace. The talent show wasn't just about performing. It was about standing up for herself, about showing that she had value no matter what they said. She had a right to be there, to take up space, and to share her music with the world. She may have been scared, but she wasn't going to let fear win. The bullies didn't get to control her anymore. It was time to take control of her own story. With each note she played, she would prove that she was more than the teasing and the mockery. She was strong, and she was ready to show them all what she was capable of. The day of the talent show finally arrived, and with it came a wave of nerves she hadn't anticipated. The moment she woke up, her heart was racing, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. It wasn't just another day. It was the day, the moment when she would step into the spotlight, and everything she had been fearing for so long could come true. But there was no turning back now. She had already signed up, and there was no way to take it all back. She was committed. As she got ready for the show, her thoughts kept drifting back to everything she had gone through, the teasing, the whispers, the doubt. She had almost let it all stop her, but now, here she was. She was about to face her biggest challenge yet. She couldn't help but feel a little proud of herself for even getting this far. It wasn't about winning the show. It was about doing something she had never thought she could do before. It was about proving to herself that she could stand up to her fears and take control of her own story. The talent show was being held in the school gymnasium, a place that was usually filled with the noise of basketball games and pep rallies. Today, though, the gym was transformed. It was darker than usual, with soft spotlights shining on the makeshift stage at the front. Rows of chairs were set up for the audience, and the air was thick with nervous energy. Students, teachers, and parents were all gathered, talking excitedly about the performances they were about to see. But for her, it felt like the whole world was watching her every move. She arrived early, hoping to calm her nerves before her turn. She sat quietly in the back, watching the other performers rehearse. Some were singing, others dancing, and a few were playing instruments, just like her, but no one seemed as nervous as she felt. They all looked so confident, like they had done this 100 times before. She couldn't help but wonder if they were as scared as she was on the inside. Her turn came, and she stood up, her legs feeling like jelly as she made her way to the stage. The spotlight hit her almost immediately, and for a brief moment, everything around her went silent. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears. She stood there, frozen for a moment, trying to calm herself. The weeks that followed were different. The teasing stopped, the whispers faded away, and the kids who had once made her feel small now seemed to look at her with new respect. She noticed a change in the way people spoke to her, the way they treated her. Some of the bullies even apologized. They didn't have to, but they did. It was awkward at first, but she appreciated it. She had learned something important that night, the power of being true to herself. It wasn't just the bullies who changed, she did too. She started to walk a little taller in the hallways, speak a little louder in class. She no longer felt like she had to hide in the shadows. For the first time, she felt like she belonged, not because of what she wore or the way she looked, but because of who she was. She wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her again. And the most amazing part? She began to share her music more. What had once been something she kept hidden away in her room was now something she wanted to share with others. She played in front of her friends, her teachers, and even her family. Each time, she felt a little less afraid, a little more confident. The music that had once been her secret was now her strength, and she knew that she could use it to reach others, to help them see her for who she truly was. Her story, the one she had kept inside for so long, was no longer something she had to hide. It was something she could be proud of. The moment she decided to face her fear and play that one song on the stage had changed everything. It had shown her that her background, her struggles and her dreams were not something to be ashamed of. They were part of who she was, and they made her strong. She had taken a leap, and it had paid off in ways she never imagined. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see the shy, bullied girl she once was. She saw someone who had fought through the doubts, the insecurities, and the fear to show the world her true self. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled at the reflection staring back at her. The days that followed the talent show felt like a new chapter in her life had just begun. She walked through the school hallways with a newfound sense of confidence, her head held high. It was like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and she could finally breathe freely. No longer did she feel invisible or like she was carrying the burden of judgment everywhere she went. The teasing had stopped, but more than that, she felt like people were starting to see her for who she truly was. Not just as the girl who didn't fit in, but as someone with strength, talent, and something valuable to offer. She noticed the change in how others interacted with her. Some of the classmates who had once ignored her now smiled when they passed her in the hall. A few even struck up conversations, asking her about her performance or about her music. She never imagined that something as simple as playing a song could lead to such a shift in how others viewed her. It wasn't just about gaining their respect. It was about feeling like she was finally being seen for who she was, not just for where she came from or the way she spoke. The bullies who had once made her life difficult didn't disappear completely, but the dynamic had changed. Some of them actually apologized. They came up to her with awkward but sincere words, admitting that they were wrong about her and that they had underestimated her. It wasn't easy to accept at first. There had been so many times when their cruelty had hurt her, and now, here they were, trying to make things right. But she wasn't angry. Instead, she realized that their apology was a small victory, a sign that the walls they had built between her and them were beginning to crumble. She had changed the way they saw her, and in turn, that had changed something inside them too. Her music became a bigger part of her life. She found herself playing, more often, not just to escape, but because it was now a way to connect with others. She played for her family, sharing the music that had once been her secret, and they were amazed at how beautiful it sounded. Her brother, who had always encouraged her to share her talents, was especially proud. He told her that he knew she had something special all along, and now the world could see it too. She smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. Her music was no longer just her own private escape. It was something she could share, something that connected her to others in a way that words never could. Her teachers also noticed the change in her. She had always been a good student, but now she seemed even more confident in class. She spoke up more, contributing ideas and answering questions with ease. It wasn't just about her grades anymore. It was about her presence, the way she carried herself. Her teachers often praised her not just for her academic abilities, but for the courage she had shown in the talent show. It felt good to be seen, and acknowledged in a way she never had been before. In the months that followed, she found herself growing in ways she hadn't expected. She began to take on new challenges, both in and out of school. She joined the school choir, something she would have never dreamed of doing before. She signed up for more activities, things that scared her but excited her at the same time. For the first time, she felt like she was truly living, not just going through the motions, but taking charge of her own life. The most important thing, however, was how she felt about herself. She wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but those moments no longer controlled her. She had learned that her worth wasn't defined by the opinions of others. It wasn't about fitting in with the popular crowd or being accepted by people who didn't understand her. It was about embracing who she was, flaws and all, and being proud of the journey that had brought her here. The talent show, that one moment of fear and uncertainty, had marked the turning point in her life. It had given her the courage to stand up for herself and show the world her true self. It had shown her that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. That performance wasn't just about playing a song. It was about reclaiming her voice, her identity, and her power. As she sat at the piano again, this time with a sense of peace, she realized that this was just the beginning. She had no idea where life would take her, but she knew one thing for sure. She was ready for whatever came next. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her own strength, and to know that no matter what, she had a voice worth hearing. And that was the most powerful lesson she could ever learn. She sat at the back of the classroom, trying to make herself as invisible as possible. Every day felt like a battle, a fight she didn't ask for, but had to face nonetheless. She had always been a quiet girl, keeping to herself because that was easier than dealing with the whispers and stares. It wasn't just the way she looked or the way she spoke. It was where she came from. Her family had moved to this town a few years ago. Coming from a different culture with a different language made her stand out in ways she didn't want to. The other kids didn't understand her or her background, and they made sure she knew it. It wasn't just the teasing in the hallway or the whispered insults in the classroom. It was the way they looked at her as if she was different, like she didn't belong. At first, she tried to ignore it. She kept her head down, did her work, and stayed as quiet as possible. But it was hard. Every time she heard someone laugh or saw a group of kids pointing at her, it stung. Sometimes they would mock the way she spoke, the words she used, her accent that reminded them she wasn't from here. Other times, they would make jokes about her clothes, her food, even her name. Every comment cut deep, even though she tried not to show it. At home, things were different. Her parents were kind and loving, But their world was so far removed from the world she faced at school. They didn't fully understand the bullying she was going through, and she didn't know how to explain it to them. They only knew their own struggles of making a new life in a new place. They wanted the best for her, of course, but they didn't see how the kids at school made her feel. As the days turned into weeks, the teasing didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. The other kids would find new ways to put her down, and she began to believe them. They made her feel small, like she didn't matter, like she would never be good enough. She started to doubt herself. Was there something wrong with her? Why couldn't she fit in like everyone else? But despite everything, she never let the bullying stop her from trying. She was smart, determined, and had a quiet strength that most people didn't see. Even when the weight of the teasing became too much to bear, she kept pushing through. In class, she excelled. She was a good student, always getting high marks and answering questions with confidence. But that didn't make the bullying go away. In fact, it sometimes made things worse. The more she succeeded, the more they found new ways to tear her down. Music, however, was something she never talked about at school. It was her escape, the one thing that made her forget about everything else. At home, she would sit by the piano, her fingers gently tapping the keys. Music was the one language she knew would never judge her. It was where she could pour all her feelings, frustrations, and dreams. Her parents had always encouraged her to keep playing, to keep practicing, but it was a private thing, something just for her. She wasn't ready to share it with anyone, especially not the kids at school who already made her feel like an outsider. The bullying had started to take its toll on her, though. She wasn't just being picked on anymore, it was becoming a part of her daily life. She felt isolated and alone, like she was carrying a heavy weight that no one else could see. She had no idea how to make it stop, and the more she tried to stay under the radar, the worse things seemed to get. But through all the struggles, there was one thing that kept her going: her music. It was her quiet strength, the one thing she still had control over. She hadn't yet realized how much it would come to mean for her, but in those quiet moments alone at the piano, she found peace. The notes she played were like whispers to her soul, telling her that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the darkness. Music had always been there for her, quietly waiting for her to discover its full power. At first, it was just something to do when she felt lonely. Her mother, who understood the importance of holding on to one's roots, had introduced her to music when she was very young. Growing up in a house where the sound of traditional songs filled the air, she quickly learned that music was more than just notes and rhythms. It was a way to express emotions, to tell stories without words. She loved the piano most of all. It wasn't easy to learn at first, but the moment she touched the keys, something inside her seemed to click. Music made sense in a way that words couldn't. It was as though the piano could speak for her in a language that didn't judge or make her feel different. Each time she played, the weight of the world outside her home seemed to disappear. It didn't matter that her classmates made fun of her or called her names. In the world of music, she was free. She didn't have to be anyone else. She could just be herself. But despite the comfort it gave her, she kept her love for music a secret. She wasn't ready to share it with anyone. After all, the other kids at school didn't care about things like music or art. They were too busy judging her for being different. She had seen how they acted when someone stepped out of line or tried to do something new. They would laugh, mock, and tear down anyone who dared to stand out. So, she kept her piano playing to herself, treating it as a private escape, a world that no one else could touch. However, there was always a part of her that longed to share it, to show others the music that made her feel whole. The sound of the piano, the rhythm of the keys, was something she wanted others to hear. But every time she thought about playing in front of others, a wave of fear washed over her. What if they laughed? What if they saw her as the weird girl who didn't belong? The thought made her freeze. She couldn't bear the idea of being ridiculed for something that was so personal to her. So, she kept it hidden, tucked away in the corners of her mind, where no one could touch it. It wasn't just her talent she kept hidden. It was also the deep emotions that came with her music. Every note she played reflected a part of her. The sadness, the fear, the hope, and the dreams she held onto despite everything. It was her way of expressing the things she couldn't say aloud. When she felt sad, the piano became her therapist, helping her make sense of all the emotions swirling inside her. When she felt angry at the bullies or frustrated with the constant teasing, the music was there to release that tension. There was something magical about how the keys could carry her away to a different place. Each time she played, the world outside her house seemed to disappear. She could imagine herself playing for a large audience, with everyone listening in awe, forgetting about where she came from or what they thought of her. For a few moments, she could dream of a world where she was accepted for who she was, not for where she was from. The piano became her safe place, a place where nothing mattered except the music. But even as she played, a small voice inside her still whispered doubts. Could she really share her music with anyone else? Could she take that step and let others see a side of her that was so vulnerable? She wasn't sure, but the more she played, the more she realized that music was not just a way to escape. It was also a way to stand up for herself. It was a way to show the world who she was without saying a word. Music was her voice, the one thing that could never be silenced by the laughter of bullies or the sting of cruel words. Slowly, without realizing it, her music started to become more than just a way to cope. It became a form of strength, a way for her to begin healing. Every note, every melody, was a small act of rebellion against everything that tried to make her feel small. Music was no longer just her secret. It was the one thing that gave her hope and helped her believe that there was more to life than the hurt she faced every day. Her mother always told her, "When you play, let the music speak for you." Maybe it was time to finally let it speak. Maybe it was time to let the world hear what she had been holding inside all this time. The school buzzed with excitement as the announcement for the upcoming talent show was made. Posters were put up all around the school, and everyone was talking about it. Some students were already practicing their dance routines, while others were preparing their acts for the big night. For most of the students, the talent show was a chance to show off what they could do, whether it was singing, dancing, or performing a magic trick. But for her, it felt like a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to face. She had heard about the talent show every year, but had always stayed away from it. The thought of performing in front of everyone was terrifying. She was fine being on the sidelines, watching others get the attention, but she never wanted to be the center of it. The bullying at school had already made her feel like an outsider, and the idea of putting herself in the spotlight was too much to bear. She would never stand a chance against the other kids who were so confident, so comfortable with who they were. She couldn't imagine herself up there, performing for an audience who had always made her feel like she didn't belong. But this time, things felt different. Her brother had been talking about the talent show for days, encouraging her to participate. He believed in her talent, even if she didn't believe in herself. He would always tell her, "You have something special inside you, something that no one else can do. Why not share it?" It was sweet the way he spoke, but it only made her feel more nervous. What if she failed? What if the bullies were there, laughing at her the whole time?